Hi there, everybody. I'm Robin Lewis from the Robin Report, and today we are really delighted to have RJ Hottovy from Placer.ai with us today to go through the numbers and to take some of your questions. We're going to revisit the summer hits and misses, spotlighting the retailers who really stood out, and of course, take a look at what's around the corner for the holiday season. Yes, it is here again. We will be taking questions from you at the end of the webcast, and you can enter them anytime using the Q&A function in Zoom. Okay, so now, let's get these insights rolling. And RJ, why don't you give us a minute or two on, what you do and what Placer does.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Robin, and thank you for having me today.
Glad to
Uh,
have you.
we are a location-based analytics company powered by mobile data. In simpler terms, that means that we can come up with foot traffic estimates for any physical property in the United States, whether that's an individual retail location, restaurant, mall, convention center, downtown area, anything you can draw a shape around on a map, we can come up with physical or foot traffic estimates for. How do we get our data? Well, we partner with about 50 different mobile app companies. And when you download that app, there's something in there. We put a little bit of code in that app. And with those partnerships, we're allowed to get 24/7 location data from that device. But importantly here, we collect no personal information about that device user. There's no way to trace that back. All our data is anonymized and aggregated. And really, we're just tracking the location of that device. With those partnerships, we've amassed a panel of over 25 million devices that we are constantly monitoring, which represents about 8% of the US population. And that's where the AI and Placer AI comes in. We then take that sample, that 8% of the US population, the devices, and then extrapolate that using a number of other variables to come up with full foot traffic estimates for again, any physical property. We work with, almost half of the top 25 retailers in the US, over half the top 20 grocers, almost every commercial retail real estate company. And when they test our data, it generally comes in pretty accurate. What's more important is I think we're much more than just a foot traffic estimate company. That's kind of our legacy. What it really is there's all these other things you can do with our data sets at this point too, whether it's visitor journey, understanding where people come before they come into a particular location, where they go after, how long they stay in, visit frequency, how loyal are they to your brand? And then importantly too, we partner with a lot of other data sets, whether it be census data or pop stats or spatial AI. From there, we can look at the zip codes that people coming into your locations are also coming from, and could put together a pretty good aggregate of that persona coming in. So we can still give you demographic and psychographic insights without violating any consumer privacy or security issues that might pop up. So a very versatile platform, a lot of things you can do. And if you've got questions about people coming into you or your competitors' stores, I think we've probably got an answer for you. So that's just the quick story on Placer AI. I head up an analytical research team within the company that helps do solve bigger picture macro and consumer behavioral questions for a lot of our large commercial real estate and retail customers.
Well, it's awesome, my friend. And you put it out there very well. So RJ, retail visits took a hit in July, August, and September as well. So Can you give us an idea of what the driving forces are behind these results? And, what does it tell us about the final months of the year?
Yeah, I think it's interesting if you look at kind of the cadence of visits throughout the year, and really it goes back to much of 2022. I think there's really two prevailing themes going on that we see from the retail visitation data right now. One is, and if I had to frame it in one term, 2023 is the year of value. Consumers are still very much focused on getting the best price. Oh, not necessarily the best price, but disruptive value in a lot of ways too. Am I getting something unique at a value price? And so if you go and look at the data, I think a lot of the pullback we've seen in terms of visitation data this year is just that consumers are being more discreet with their spending. And I think we can even trace this back again to 2022. You go back to March of 22, that was that period we had been dealing with food inflation, some rent and healthcare inflation as well. That was when we saw gas prices spike last year. And really ever since since then, there's been a change in consumer mindset. Consumers are looking for value. It's interesting; they're actually shopping more locations to seek out value, spending more time shopping, and comparing prices on the shelf. But at the same time, visiting, the stores less frequently. They're
Yeah.
going to their normal grocery store less frequently. I think we see some of that number here too. If we look at overall retail trends, a lot of that is driven by the discretionary categories too. People pulling back on things, whether maybe that's home improve or home furnishing, home improvement, sporting goods, some of those categories that we saw a big pull forward during the pandemic. And now we're seeing some normalization, particularly as people are more strapped and trying to stretch their household budget. The other interesting one here too, and I think it'll come up a couple other times during the presentation today. We've also kind of moved into more of a very event-focused consumer mindset right now. So if we go actually look at a week-by-week data, and I don't unfortunately have those on the slide, but if we look at kind of the week-by-week data, the periods that consumers are spending right now, it's the holidays. If you go back to Valentine's Day and Easter and Mother's Day and Father's Day and 4th of July, we've seen a lot of visits during those periods. It's just the periods in between, the shoulder periods, that are a little bit weaker. And so if you look kind of here, you see some of the recovery during the periods where we did have holidays. We saw a little bit of the Omicron overlap in the beginning of the year, but if you go to, kind of February, we saw Valentine's Day lift. Some of the numbers we see in April, May were a little bit of Easter shift there too, but June, we saw, Father's Day and a few other holidays in there, and July 4th was there. But, since then, we really kind of gone into this, holiday desert, if you will. We haven't really seen a big holiday to drive things, although now we're starting to come up on October or Halloween, and as well as some of the Amazon promotional period that generally has a halo effect on stores. So I think we may have hit the low point with the August and September numbers, and now we're just kind of coming back in the year where people have shown a propensity to spend during the holiday events right now. So I think that's kind of how to summarize what's going on in the space right now. That's probably the best way to frame it.
Yeah. But even with the challenges, of course, there are segments out there that overperformed, right? And so,
Yeah.
what can we learn from those stories?
So, I touched on it that the value really is where we see a lot of growth here. And so if we go to this slide where we've got a number of the categories in the year-over-year growth, or the third quarter 23 versus the third quarter 22 and the visitation growth, it's not a shock to see dollar and discount stores being one of the better performing categories. Superstores is actually down year over year, but that's largely a byproduct of either Walmart having fewer stores than they did, or some of the issues that Target encountered during the quarter as well. Generally speaking, if we look at that, the superstore category, for much of the year was outpacing general grocery. Grocery is another one you kind of have to look at. It doesn't tell you a lot to just look at negative 1.4 here. You have to kind of dive in another layer deeper. And if we look at things, we see that value grocery players like an Aldi or a grocery outlet are doing very well, whereas it's more the conventional players like a Kroger and Albertsons that have seen a little bit more of a challenge. But I thought, one of the ones that was most interesting, and we'll touch on this again too, is that theaters and music venues are doing very well. And there's two things that tells us. One is that the Barbenheimer effect during the summer was real. Brought people back into the theaters that hadn't been there. And while visits to theaters are still not where we were compared to pre-pandemic levels, I think it'd be short-sighted to assume that category is dead. There's still some changes that need to take place to make it a little bit more experiential and a little bit more enjoyable for everybody involved. But there is a place for it. And we've seen this idea that more consumers are looking for experiences. So I think that's something we're definitely seeing, that when we group in music venues as well. It was a big summer for concert venues, a lot of people there. So the shift that we saw from 22 to 23 in terms of experiences continues to play out right now too. So I think that's going to continue to hold. People continue to spend on experiences, travel, music venues, concerts, things like that. Still where we're seeing a lot of people's excess discretionary spending go towards.
Yeah, we've also talked a lot about this hybrid work, its impact on office visits and what it's doing to that real estate market. It's incredible. The influence on restaurants and retail in the business areas. Yet office visits have rebounded in recent months to higher levels than before. So, what are your expectations for this new office normal, if you will? And how do you think retailers and restaurants that depended on this traffic can adapt to this?
It's a great question, and it's been fascinating to watch. Just the overall recovery. If we look at kind of where we stand on a nationwide basis right now, we are about 60% recovered, maybe a little bit higher in certain places, a little bit higher in terms of 60% of the visits. Where we are compared to pre-pandemic levels. So compared to 2019, we're about 60% recovered in terms of number of office visits. Now, it's important to distinguish because the number of visitors is actually closer to 80%. And what the difference is between that, the explanation between that is the idea that people are going back largely Tuesday through Thursday, and they're coming back to the office a lot less on Monday through Friday. Where does this shake out? It'd be interesting to see, because pre-pandemic, there was about 10% of the US population that was permanently work from home. And now we're, assuming that 80% number, using that number, we're at about 20% that are kind of not going in the office in some form or another. Where does it shake out? It's not going back to the 10%. It's probably going to, go a little bit lower than that 20%. Probably somewhere in the mid to high teens is where we end up shaking out in terms of that permanent work from home from here. But to your point, that obviously has ramifications across urban retail, restaurant, anything in an urban setting.
Yeah.
So the other point you brought up, and I think this is important too. So if we look at the year-over-year numbers, we are starting to see improvement on that front. And again, it differs by market. It makes sense. We're seeing markets like New York City, where a lot more of the financial services employers have required people to come back. We're seeing much higher visits and visitors to that market. Markets where we've seen migration away, maybe San Francisco, also a market where there's a lot of work from home because of the tech focus there. It's a lot less. But I do think that it's the way office visits, certainly have changed the way retailers and restaurants need to operate in those markets. But I don't think they should be left for dead. I think that there is going to be a population in those markets. Certainly, we've actually seen a big pickup in some urban residential areas, particularly as kind of that older population. Maybe they moved away to the southern markets, and now it's backfilled by Gen Z and millennial households that maybe never had access to that market before. So we're seeing a real renaissance in urban residential. And I think because of that, you can't abandon an urban real estate strategy just because we're seeing a change in work models. I do think that it probably is worth revisiting the kind of format you have. Maybe you can get by with a smaller format. Maybe for a restaurant, you don't need as much square footage. You can get by with maybe kind of a delivery hub, ghost kitchen type model, things like that. So I guess the answer to the question is that I think you have to be mindful of these changes that are going on at the office and be able to respond in terms of staffing and inventory because of that. But at the same time, I think you have to be you can't forget about the urban markets. They're still going to be an important part of the overall retail strategy, and that it's going to take time for everything to shake out. Obviously, there's probably a lot of pain that's going to happen in the commercial real estate and on the office front as it's going to come over. But I do think that there still is some, there is a reason to be in these markets, especially with urban residential kind of being an area that we've seen a nice pickup.
The pandemic really drove a lot of industries in different directions. It caused really transformational stuff that really is going to continue long term.
Yeah, I think you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, it's not even, it's across the board. I mean, we're seeing changes in consumer behavior that are leading to things. We're seeing changes in that's the ripple effect is that it changes how you design buildings, how you staff them, inventory management. It really is, and it takes a seismic event for consumers to really change. But obviously, the pandemic was one of those seismic events, and we're seeing it across a number of categories.
Yeah. Next question I have for you, which I don't know, it's been driving me nuts, and that's this whole Barbie thing. I mean, there are very few stories that drove the buzz out there like Barbie this summer. I can't. So, what do you see from the movie's impact, and what does it tell you about theaters moving forward and retail more broadly?
It's interesting that you bring it up, and as a father of two daughters, it was interesting to see the phenomenon work its way out in our own household. But what's been fascinating to me is we've seen this across a couple other categories as well. I think the underlying message is that consumers are generally looking for something new and this level of excitement. We talked about it early on about it's value that really is kind of the key to this year, but it's really more innovative value. The idea that I want something new, but I also want it at a price that I can afford. That really is, if I had to sum up the current state of the consumer, that's what it is. And I think if we
Mm.
look at kind of the Barbenheimer phenomenon, that's exactly what it was, is that we saw a couple different movies that, a little bit unique, especially when paired together, it led to a cultural phenomenon. Obviously movie theaters were a category that were hard hit by the pandemic, because of changes in the way, the studios brought content to, to the consumers in terms of streaming and things like that. Consumers were looking for new and different and experience. And I think this gave them the opportunity to have an experience with Barbenheimer, the movies paired together. And so I think that that's exactly what we're seeing. And we've seen it across other categories too. I mean, restaurants, for example, a lot of those, just by necessity, a lot of restaurant chains had to go to a much more streamlined menu, much more streamlined staff. As a result, they weren't able to add as much innovation to the menu. And, if we go back to 2022, I mean, some of the things that we saw with like McDonald's and others, where they, maybe had an adult Happy Meal or something unique that we weren't getting before. The idea that if you can bring something innovative that, excites the market, and it sounds intuitive, but, a lot of chains struggle to find something new that they're okay doing. And I think that that's the message here, is that newness and really content is really driving things. Now, the big question coming out of this, obviously, we see that the Barbenheimer phenomenon brought a lot of people back to the movie theaters. We saw visitation trends almost back to pre-pandemic levels for a lot of the movie theaters. The big question in our mind is what happens with, we're seeing movies get delayed now because of the strikes. Obviously, the strikes have ended, but that still has delayed a lot of the movie theaters. And so maybe they lose a little bit of momentum that we saw during the summer as we get in the back half of the year and early next year. So, but I think the message still holds true here, that the idea that, something innovative, something new is really what consumers are looking for after kind of being, sheltered in place for so long with the pandemic. People are really looking for an excuse, and something like this really drives them a lot of visitation.
I also think that it's that we're really beginning to see the younger generations demanding really, something new, but really across the boards. I mean, you look on television, the internet, there are so many new brands out there that I can almost not even pronounce them.
Yeah.
It's just like these younger people are throwing things out there, and a lot of it is very different.
Yeah, very much so.
Anyway, so you guys, Placer, saw that the mall index visits were down year over year, but visit duration was up, and the summer still provided a significant visit peak. So what do you tell us about mall performance in the summer and potential for the holiday season?
Yeah, so I think what we're showing here really, it kind of is a byproduct of what we just talked about, that innovation and finding ways to engage with your consumer. And what's been interesting about this, we've worked with a lot of commercial retail real estate companies, a lot of the mall owner and operators. I get the pleasure of talking to them on a regular basis. And one of the things that I think the smart companies in this space realize is that, that not every one of their tenants can be experiential and kind of be the thing that drives people into the centers themselves. And that in a lot of cases, the malls themselves have to take on their own brand identity and kind of really, focus in on things like, having different experientials or community, outreach and engagement type strategies, having more mall concerts at malls, things like that, to really drive a lot of that. And I think a lot of that was what we saw in terms of the summer months, in terms of the visitation trends, was really just that, was the people, the mall companies have really done a good job the last couple of years planting the seeds with their visitors and kind of taking on a brand of their own, and people wanting that experience. We went back and looked at the concert venue numbers that we saw as one of the key categories in the third quarter. Well, the byproduct of that is a lot of the malls are doing concerts and things like that to drive people in the stores into their properties. And so I think that's there. I mean, it's not the only thing. There's things like loyalty programs. I think just in general, the mixed use strategies that we're seeing, a lot of malls becoming, office or co-working or even residential spaces, has also had an impact. And I think some of that's rolling up, and you're seeing that in that dwell time too. So we look at kind of the higher dwell time that we saw during the summer months. It really is just that, as people are finding ways to interact and engage with mall properties right now. And so the idea that the malls are dead, I think is, can be farther from the truth. I think that, bad malls or, malls that aren't willing to adapt, maybe they're dead. But I think that a lot of the groups that have started to adapt and adding more experiential type things, concerts, play areas, things that get people out there, are really enjoying some success and in a lot of ways a renaissance. So I think that that's kind of one of the key messages coming out of the pandemic. And for those operators that are a little bit skeptical about the additional costs that would go into that, the visitation trends we see really seems like it justifies there's a good return on investment with those kind of initiatives.
Exactly. Rather than being a cost, they should view it as an investment. You're right. So, we think about bigger concepts when we normally talk about experience in retail, but some of the top performers are succeeding because the visit is a shopping experience, just kind of like what you were talking about. So can you explain a little further what that means and why it's important?
Yeah, and as we've been kind of thinking about it, you see winners kind of that cater to more higher end audiences. You see winners that are kind of catering to a lower end audience. But I think the consistent message is, again, is it's not just low prices. It's giving me a low price with something unique, a part of the experience as well. So if we look at kind of some of the big winners this year to date, Ulta, Marshalls, Trader Joe's, Costco, each one of those kind of stand out, and it seems like kind of diverse. I mean, yes, we've got Trader Joe's and Costco that are both operate heavily in the food retail space, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of common connection on the surface with these four names. But if you dig deeper, I really do think it kind of ties back to that innovative value front. And a group like Ulta, we've seen most beauty retailers out of all discretionary categories, beauty is but leading the pack. It is a direct tie to the idea that people want to be out and experience kind of this reopening. They want to be out in the public after the pandemic. So obviously you want to look your best, you do it. And so that has helped lift that category. But I think it'd be, an oversimplification just to call that the reason why Ulta is doing well. I think they've done a really good job. If you look at kind of the demographic and, the psychographic data of who they're pulling in, they've done a really good job bringing a younger audience to their platform or to their stores. They've done a good job bringing a more ethnically diverse platform to their stores. And that really comes back to the idea that they're bringing new brands that are affordable for this audience, that captures that sense of newness. So I think that it'd be overly simplified just to say, hey, Ulta's in beauty, they're doing well because of that. They're doing well because they are figuring out a way to bring that newness into the stores. Marshall's similar story. People are looking for something unique and value. Like most treasure hunt focused retailers, they have that advantage. But they're doing a good job on the merchandising front too. They're being opportunistic with their purchases and the merchandising. They're bringing in different brands and different things that that haven't been seen before. And so I think that's a big part of it. Trader Joe's is an interesting one. I mentioned earlier that we've seen consumers are shopping more locations to kind of for their discretion or non-discretionary purchase. They're going to more grocery stores as they seek out values. So if I see a value at the grocery store down the way, I'm going to go over there and make at least one visit there just to get that deal. So we're seeing people shop a wider number of locations, which has put downward pressure on visit frequency for kind of each chain. But what's interesting is people shop more locations, it's put more downward pressure on kind of the average household income that you're seeing coming into that. But what's been interesting is if we look at kind of a group like Trader Joe's, they've done a really good job capturing kind of that middle to lower income consumer. That's typically had a higher average household income than Trader Joe's. They're starting to branch down into that lower income consumer. And as a compared to some of the other grocers, they're actually starting to see a pickup in visit frequency among kind of that lower income consumer. So it's really interesting to see that shift. And again, I think it plays this idea, I'm getting something unique at a value price. And we're seeing kind of they're kind of the poster child for this movement towards private label or store brands, however you want to call it. But I think the important differentiation is that they do a lot of innovation on that private label and that store brand. It's almost the point there's several websites devoted to new product launches at Trader Joe's. It's got a cult in its own way. So we see a lot of excitement around that. And Costco is a similar situation where people are looking for innovation and newness. And I think
Kirkland.
Same thing. Kirkland has become its own brand. I mean, I think it's almost a faulty to call it a store brand at this point, even though it is by definition, it really carries its own weight. And so I think the idea here again is that it's innovative value, disruptive value, however you want to call it. It's something new that I'm not getting somewhere else.
Yeah. Costco's even into apparel now. Kirkland. Yeah.
They've done a good job on that too. And they've got some of the best merchants in the business. So
they do. So off price, okay? Off price. I mean, I don't know for how many years I've been saying that retailers are racing to the bottom. So, So why is off price so strong? And a lot of it weaves into, you can pull out of some of the stuff you've already said. But do you think the strength will slow down?
I think it's going to continue. I mean, I think the idea of disruptive value is going to continue to drive results in off price. Again, it comes down to merchant strength more than anything else. And I think that both TJX and Marmax, the group, and Ross have both done a good job on this front. Burlington's seen some strength there as well. I think that it's going to continue. I think the idea that people are looking for to stretch their household budget. I think largely it's off price apparel that's kind of driven this more than some of the other categories. Although some of like home goods have actually had some moments as well, even with kind of pressure on home furnishing retailers. But I think that we're going to continue to see this idea that people are looking for innovative value play on the back of the year. And especially as we've kind of seen a glut of inventory for certain categories, particularly in kind of the footwear, athletic footwear and apparel space. We've seen a lot of inventory coming into the space. And as the mass merchants are kind of more focused on the non-discretionary categories like food and beverage, they're making less purchases in kind of the home furnishing or the apparel side of the business, which is going to open up more opportunities for off-price to come in and take advantage of that. So I think this is going to continue. I don't think that off-prices 2023 is just kind of a one-off. I think you're going to see from a just tougher comparison standpoint, the year-over-year visits probably are not going to look as good, but there's no reason to think that they won't have positive visitation year-over-year. I'm not seeing a lot that's going to change, in terms of discretionary budgets overnight. There's still a lot of pressures, and so I think a lot of people are going to continue to frequent the off-price channel.
Yeah, now the next thing, D2C, owned retail was has been the buzz for quite a while.
Yep.
But that's not just online, but also branded retail stores. Anyway, but now there seems to be a return to wholesale, and that's starting to grab a few headlines. So what is the right approach to these ends of the business?
It's a great question. And again, I think it comes down to each brand individually. I don't know if there's a blanket answer here. It is interesting because, we did see, 2022 was kind of a big push from a lot of the direct-to-consumer brands, because the cost of acquiring somebody online has gotten a lot higher with changes in Apple and Google in terms of IDFA identification for advertisers. With changes on that front, it's gotten a lot more expensive. The customer acquisition cost has gotten a lot higher on the digital side. And as a result, we saw a lot of groups start to open up retail locations. And some have done a good job with it. Lululemon and Nike. They're not really purely direct to consumer brands to begin with, and I think that's kind of the underlying message. Is those that kind of have the omni approach that are the ones doing well. They've done a good job, but it's not just the idea of opening up stores. They've done they harmonize with their digital data. They know the markets where they're making a lot of online orders. They do a really good job of the experience, the whole theme of what we talked about, experiential retail, and make innovation. They've done a good job on that. Whereas not every retailer's done that. And if we look kind of overall sports and sporting goods, that's actually down on a year-over-year basis. And, some of that's because we saw a big pull forward in demand during the pandemic. And honestly, we really haven't seen that product replacement cycle. Everyone bought their sporting goods in, beginning of the pandemic, people working out in the house more. Now we kind of seen that lull, but I wouldn't write off this category too. Even like a group like Dick's Sporting Goods, which you're actually seeing is an increase in, the number of groups that want to partner with them because they've taken a more experiential aspect. The Dick's House of Sport concept, seeing a lot of positive trends in terms of not only the number of visits they have, visit frequency, how big of a trade area they pull from, some really interesting stats for that. So I think if we had to sum up, the approach, it really kind of depends on the brand. I think that there's room for a lot of the D2C brands to have their own retail location, but don't assume that just because you're a good D2C brand that you're good at retailing. It's going to require some help. And the other thing is that there are some very good partners on that. Some established multi-brand retailers like a Dick's Sporting Goods that really are doing, and they're doing some innovative stuff on the experience front as well. Yeah.
So the number of sporting goods products that are coming out, the brands that are coming out like crazy. So what do you see in the dining area more broadly in Q3? And what do you expect in the final months of the year for this whole restaurant dining segment?
It's a good question, and it's one that kind of dovetails nicely with the themes we've talked about here. I mean, we've seen that the higher price point categories and restaurants on this slide, for example, is full service dining and casual dining, fine dining and casual dining combined. Generally speaking, we've seen that the visits to the full service concepts have been weaker this year, and that makes sense as consumers are looking to stretch their household budgets. But at the same time, too, we've actually, if we broke this down by week, we'd actually see that the data again for holidays and event-driven spending remains pretty strong for this category as well. And the byproduct of that, we've actually seen the limited service categories like fast food, fast casual, specialty coffee. They're holding up a lot better. Specialty coffee, that's a little bit of kind of a couple different things going on there. A little bit of that return to work. We saw those numbers earlier. There's been a little bit of improvement in that, which has driven that. But that's actually more of a byproduct of just people changing their behavior and going in later in the morning. Kind of early afternoon. That's what's really driving a lot of the visitation for that. Is a lot of the especially coffee chains like Starbucks have started moving locations more to suburban areas. A lot of consumers that are working from home have capitalized on that. So I think if I had to say where we're headed with the holidays in terms of dining, still going to be very much of an event-driven focus with it. I still think we're going to see the QSR and limited service space do well. And honestly, if you see the numbers here, you see that fast casual and QSR being down year over year. That's really a byproduct of last year. That's tougher comparisons. And if you go back, we talked about newness in a category. Well, McDonald's had the adult Happy Meal promotion last year that drove the overall category by almost 6 percentage points in terms of visits. McDonald's visits
Really?
alone. Yes, that was one of the most successful promotions I've ever seen in the QSR space. And so because we're lapping that, that's where some of that pressure is coming from. So if I had to frame it, limited service players are going to continue to be the outperformers, but we'll see some nice visits for casual dining, fine dining around the different events in the back half of the year. So I think that's kind of how to think about it as we look into the next couple of months and into 2024.
Yeah. Well, always the final question. What do you see for the holidays?
And it's interesting, the holidays, because I think we're already here, like you said. It's not just, it's coming around the corner. I mean, I think Amazon's Prime Deal days have already kind of kicked that off, and to be honest, it may have even been earlier than that. And that's kind of the overarching message is that we've seen that this expansion, earlier and earlier the holiday season. The visits last year were really kind of in that. If you look at kind of pre-pandemic, we're really in that October, early November timeframe, and then we saw kind of leveling out. People's taking the pause on things, and then you get that last minute shopper that picks up again. If we kind of look and year over year is a little bit different, but I think we're going to continue to see, and this is interesting too, because the holidays in the back half of the year are kind of more multi-week periods as opposed to the holidays in the first half of the year where that's kind of individual days behind that. I think we're going to continue to see a decent October. November will probably look okay just because you're lapping some easier comparisons. And then again, this last minute push. But I think a lot of the themes that we talked about, whether it be disruptive value, whether it be experiential, whether giving consumers newness, or even just some of the new brands that are starting to pop up. I think there's still a lot of things that people are looking for. Yes, we're dealing with discretionary spending headwinds. There's not any major new product cycles in electronics or even apparel that are really driving a lot of that. But I think at a micro level, kind of a brand level, I think we're seeing a lot of newness and things that are at that front as well. So that's kind of my expectations for the last couple of months, is that continuation of what we've seen this year. But those players that have done a good job kind of innovating and experiential and newness are going to be the winners as we look to the holiday season.
Well, listen, I think this is great. And my colleague, Deborah Patton, I think it was collecting some of the questions from the audience. Deborah, do you want to come on?
I am, and I did.
Good.
So there are a couple of questions that relate to value, and this is for both of you. So do you think that value is cyclical, or are we in a place in our society now where it's psychological, economic, based on world events?
That's a great question.
That is a really good question.
Do you want to start, RJ?
Sure, I'll take that one to start, but that is a fantastic question. Honestly, I think it's a bit both. I don't think that I think there certainly is a cyclical element to it. I do think that as we've seen inflation really become kind of the overarching theme in terms of consumer visitation and behavioral. I think certainly people are flocking to value on that front. I think that's driven a lot of it, but it can also be driven by other factors as well. It can be structural as well. We have seen a bifurcation in terms of household income across the board. And so I think that there is an element that is structural to it too, and that you kind of have to be mindful that it can be both driven by cyclicality as well as just other structural events. And honestly, that's probably the biggest thing that we as a team, the Placer quote unquote water cooler, since we're all remote, talk about, is the idea that which categories we saw coming out of the pandemic really saw changes in behavior versus those that are just really kind of a byproduct of this pull forward and now reversion to the mean. And I think that, certain categories, certainly some of these more experiential ones have seen some real, changes, whereas some of the other ones are just really a pull forward and stuff. So that's my answer, is it's a bit of both. Value is certainly something that is cyclical, but also has an element of structural to it as well.
Well, that was a brilliant answer. And but I will follow that with, I think there is so much stuff out there, and there has been for so many years, that value today is obviously, in my mind, in the eye of the beholder. Meaning that I think with so much stuff out there, and forget about how much of it is in landfills, the fragmentation and the demassification of almost every consumer industry is going to continue. So what we are going to end up with is more goods than we need, unless somehow the younger generations balance it out so that we are on demand economy. I just think the race to the bottom is continuing. I think the luxury market is in trouble, a lot of it having to do with China. But I think people are willing to accept, frankly, what I would call garbage. I mean, you take the quality of stuff coming out of a Primark or any number of discount stores. So the definition of value is in the eye of the beholder, and I just think en masse, it is declining across the boards. It's a pretty cynical comment to make, but I do believe it.
Okay, so tangential to that, it seems like there's a paradox. We talk so much about value, and then you realize the price of a ticket to a Taylor Swift concert or a Beyonce concert. They're making a fortune. Taylor Swift has got her own line of clothing, so do they all. So it just doesn't seem to jive very well. Doesn't sync in terms of what we keep talking about value.
It's a great point, and it's something I think we kind of touched on a little bit, the idea that consumers are willing to spend for the event. So whether that's a holiday or whether that's a Taylor Swift concert. Now, not obviously that's not in everybody's price range. God knows we couldn't afford that, the tickets to the show when it came to town here in Chicago. But I do think that the idea that people are willing to save up for something unique and something completely different. Obviously that was the number one concert in terms of experience. But at the same time too, the periods in between, that's where the focus on value is. So I agree, on surface it seems paradoxical, but at the same time, I think that kind of shows that the importance of experience, and kind of that in this day and age compared to goods and goods in the past, is really the services side, the experiences that are driving a lot of the visitation trends in this market coming out of the pandemic. And it makes sense too that a lot of us were kind of stuck in the house and really focused on making the most of the experiences in this market. So I think that that's kind of the way you get around that paradox, is just thinking about it. It's really two different need states that are going on right now. It's value in kind of everyday stuff, but it's kind of that experience that people are willing to pay a premium for,
instead of back to school clothes.
Yeah.
So, well, your family's in luck because Taylor Swift has a movie coming out this Friday.
Oh, so we got tickets. We got tickets already. Don't worry.
Yeah, no, I was going to say every household does. It's sold out. So part of that too is like, does it require a redefinition of what retailers do? We've seen that they've become content creators. They've gone into a lot of different places. So do you think mall operators need to become concert producers or entertainment producers?
I think we're already starting to see that in a way.
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
we're seeing a lot of changes on that front. The role that they play within a community has certainly changed, and it's certainly as the mix of their tenants have changed, they have to take on new roles, and whether that be content producers or retail media companies on their own, it really has changed, and I think that that's going to continue to change. Obviously they're bringing in different types of tenants, not just different types of retailers, but they're also bringing in office or co-working or other elements of experience in there too. So I think that their roles are going to completely change. And you're right, content producers, not just concert goers, but in terms of other things, as they kind of put a brand, define a brand for their properties as well. I think that's going to change. Robin, I don't know about you, but that's my take.
No, I ditto. I would too. Exactly.
So kind of on a different front, do you ever correlate consumer optimism and confidence in all of those studies with your research on footfall and traffic and what's up, what's down? Is there a correlation to the consumer confidence index?
Generally speaking, there's a loose correlation. We do see that show up. That's always been there's always been a little bit of disconnect between consumer confidence and retail sales numbers as well. And so there's a little bit of a disconnect as well. But generally speaking, it generally correlates fairly well. I mean, this year consumer confidence numbers are down, and we looked at that first slide. Visitations were down. I think it kind of depends on category and stuff like that. But we do look at things like that, survey data, and because it's interesting. Generally speaking, I'd say our data correlates pretty well. But where it gets super interesting is where you see footfall and visitation data, that doesn't correlate with that study. Maybe people are giving different answers than what they're doing, and maybe they don't want to acknowledge that they're shopping more in value channels, things like that. We generally see it correlate pretty well, and so with the studies we've done on that front, it holds it very nicely, which is good because we want our data to be the most accurate out there. But it is interesting to kind of look at some of the behavioral trends and what people are saying in the survey and what that means for visitation trends.
So there's another question that's kind of connected to that. It's kind of like a behavioral economics. So do you think that there's any way to validate? A lot of stores have closed, saying because of theft, shrink. Target just closed a whole bunch of stores.
Yeah.
But can you correlate that to footfall? Because there's another side of that argument where a lot of people think, well, they're just underperforming stores and they aren't doing well, and they're using the shrink narrative as an excuse. But is there some way to dig into that?
It's a fascinating question, and it's one that I've heard a couple times already. It's been one we've been trying to look into more and more. Because it's hard to pull out exactly from our visitation data, because it's, are we seeing less visits or things like that? I mean, it's hard to distinguish, what the purpose of that person in the store, the intent going into that. It's a little bit tougher to get that data. What I will say is a lot of the markets that we've seen closures in, are markets that saw a lot of migration away. One of the great things about the Placer platform is that we can not only look at store visits, but we can also look at visitation trends. And, when we already showed the office buildings as well. So some of the bigger picture macro questions, and this idea that people moved away from markets like New York and Chicago and San Francisco, although we did say that the urban residential, we're seeing a big recovery year over year in some of those markets. Overall, they're still down on a year over 3 year basis. And if you look at some of the markets that are closing, they were also impacted by migration. So I think certainly shrink played a role in it, but I think there was other things at play at some of these locations as well, whether they be just in underperforming markets or markets that saw a lot of migration away. The real reality is that the trade area that a lot of these stores that were built on, particularly in the last 10 years, has changed dramatically. We've seen migration away from certain markets to, in the north or in the west to the south, the Florida markets, the Texas markets, Arizona, Carolinas have all seen a lot of population growth. So the trade area that maybe that store was built on has changed quite a bit. Also, we've seen migration away from, and again, on a year over 4 year basis or pre to post pandemic, a lot of migration away from urban to suburban and rural locations. So we're seeing more groups looking to migrate or open up stores there. Maybe smaller markets that you've never would have thought about that have seen some population growth. So I do think shrink is an issue. I don't think it's just made up, but I do think that there's an element of the trade areas in these stores have changed a lot too. So
yeah, no, I think that's true, but I also know that organized retail crime, as they're calling it, has intensely increased, and that's a major issue. I when all of this first started happening, I said, you know, the retailers would always say, make their excuses around the weather, right?
Yeah.
And so I thought there was a lot of that, but the more and more I'm, you know, out there and talking to people and talking to executives in the industry, there is a lot more of that organized crime,
Yeah.
which is really devastating in a way.
It really has become an issue. I
Yeah.
think that's, again, I don't want to downplay that it's not an issue. I think it is definitely an issue. But I think that, you know, there's also other aspects, other, you know, derivatives of that too. If you look at the markets and kind of what may be prompting some of that organized crime in those particular areas,
Yeah.
that are also byproducts of what's driving those store closures.
Yep. Agree.
Okay, one last question. Do you think with the new Toys R Us strategy, do you think there'll be a renaissance for the brand?
That's a good question. I've kind of got and if kind of answer to it. One of the themes, and it's sort of, we hinted on a little bit with the experience front, and we hinted on it with a little bit with the McDonald's story as well. There is definitely a nostalgia play right now. People are kind of looking back, and the things that kind of drive that nostalgic, particularly among kind of that, you know, late Gen X, you know, millennial and Gen Z households. There really is, you know, we see visitation trends favoring some of the nostalgic plays. And generally speaking, I mean, we get it. I mean, it makes a lot of sense for these store-and-store partnerships. It's not just the Toys R Us Macy's relationship. It's also, you know, Lowe's and Petco. It's, you know, some
airports.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of things that, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you can drive extra visits because you fill out kind of the, you know, fill in the product gap that a store may not have, there does make a lot of sense. I mean, we've seen it with the beauty partnerships that are out, the Kohl's and Sephora and the Ulta, Target. Those have done a really good job driving new customers. And the more surprising things in a lot of cases is it's not taking away from their standalone stores in a lot of cases either. But at the end of the day, it comes down to execution too. So I think that has got to be, you know, thing. It's not just the case where you can just put on a Toys R Us logo at a Macy's store and just hope that's going to drive it. It plays back to the themes that we've talked about. It's got to be well merchandised. It's got to have people in there who, you know, are kind of, you know, not necessarily that they are Macy's employees, but maybe they are more focused on the toy. It's just got to be kind of the whole experience there. So I think stores and store concepts, they make a lot of sense, but it's also got to be executed very well.
Yeah, I think there'll be a lot of the Barbie type effect,
Yeah.
you know, among generations that. So yeah, the speed with which they are expanding is pretty astounding, and but I think, first of all, I think the execution is good. I think their distribution strategy is one that is, you know, flood the marketplace with it, which is kind of like a Michael Kors strategy years ago, kind of pump and dump, which for apparel you can't do, but I'm not so sure it can't be done for toys, and particularly when there's a certain amount of nostalgia attached to it, like Barbie.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see. I think the people who are in charge of it, who own it, very smart people, and I think I don't know, if I were to bet on it, I would give it a positive thumbs up, but we'll see.
So we look forward to our next session with you in a couple of months. We'll find out about Toys R Us and also whether Taylor Swift and Beyonce's movies become the same phenomenon that we experienced over the summer with Barbie. So
I wouldn't bet against it.
I know AMC may still prevail. So thank you very much. This was terrific.
Thanks, RJ. Nice meeting you.
Thank you, everyone. Yep.